My husband had barely been in the ground 3 days when his children showed up at my door. They didn't come to comfort me. They came with a list: his houses, his money, his business. They thought I was a broken, grieving widow who'd sign anything without a fight. They had no idea their father had already planned the ultimate revenge just for them. If you're new here, welcome. I want to ask you something before we start. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I want to see how far this story travels. And if you want the ending, stay till the last minute and subscribe, because it's worth it. My name is Margaret Hale. I was married to Walter for 22 years, and 3 days after his funeral, I sat in his leather office chair while his 2 sons stood in front of me deciding my fate. Marcus, the eldest at 45, wore his father's death like an expensive suit, tailored perfectly to his own advantage. Derek, 3 years younger, stood beside him like a loyal lieutenant, all soft features and false concern. They'd flown in for the funeral. During the 3 months of Walter's illness, when it actually mattered, I'd been alone. "Colleen, we need to discuss some practical matters," Marcus said, in that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "What kind of practical matters?" He pulled a thick manila folder from his briefcase and set it on Walter's desk. "The house here in Sacramento, around 850,000 goes to Derek and me jointly. The lake villa, 750,000 also to us. The business assets, another 400,000, split between us. Our home, our honeymoon villa, gone in 2 sentences. And what about me?" I asked quietly. "Well, naturally, there's the life insurance, 200,000. That should be more than sufficient going forward. $200,000 for a 63-year-old woman who'd given up her career to build a life around this family." "It's not personal, Colleen," Derek said, in a voice that made my skin crawl. "Dad always wanted the family assets to stay within the bloodline." Bloodline. As if 22 years of marriage meant nothing. "There's one more thing," Marcus added, pulling out a smaller document. "Dad's medical bills. Insurance covered most of it, but there's still about 180,000 outstanding. Since you were his wife, the hospital's looking to you for payment. 200,000 coming in, 180,000 going out, $20,000 to rebuild an entire life." "You can stay in the house for 30 days while you make arrangements," Marcus said. "We think that's more than fair." They left me alone in that office, surrounded by the life Walter and I had built. My hand found the small drawer where he kept his personal things, and underneath old receipts, my fingers touched something unexpected, a small brass key I'd never seen before. It didn't fit any lock in our house, but Walter had kept it in his most private place. Why? Through the window, I watched Marcus and Derek standing by their car, heads close together, already celebrating. Neither of them looked back at the house where their father's wife sat with the ruins of her life spread out in front of her. But watching them drive away, something strange happened. Instead of despair, a small cold clarity started to take root. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd erased me. What they didn't know was that Walter had always been smarter than either of his sons, and 22 years of marriage to him had rubbed off on me. My attorney, Gerald, looked more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen him. "Colleen, I have to advise you in the strongest terms. This is not the right decision." I'd told him I wanted to sign everything away. "You could fight this," he said. "There are irregularities in the will, questions about Walter's mental state during the final revision." "How long would a contest take?" "Months, possibly years. And in the meantime, I'm on the hook for 180,000 in medical debt I can't cover." I looked out his window at the river below. "What if I sign whatever they want, waive every claim, walk away clean? How fast could that happen?" Gerald stared at me. "A week, maybe 2. But Colleen, why would you even consider that?" I couldn't tell him about the key still sitting in my purse, growing heavier every hour. I couldn't explain the certainty growing in me that Walter had left me something they didn't know about. "Maybe it's easier to let them have what they think they deserve," I said. "This isn't about what they deserve," Gerald said sharply. "This is about what Walter intended, and this will doesn't reflect the man I knew." My phone buzzed, a text from Derek. Could we meet today to discuss timeline for property transfer? Want to make this smooth for everyone? Then one from Marcus. Perhaps we could finalize everything by end of week. Gerald's face darkened. They're rushing you. Classic pressure tactic. He was right. In all the years I'd known them, Marcus was methodical to a fault and Derek was leisurely about everything. This sudden urgency was completely out of character. Maybe they're just eager to move on, I said. I didn't believe it, either of us. Or maybe, Gerald said, they know something you don't. I didn't need 48 hours to think about it. I'd already decided, and whatever that key opened, I intended to find out before I signed a single page. It took 2 days of searching before I found it, a business card tucked behind Walter's driver's license in the wallet the hospital had returned to me. First National Bank, a handwritten number on the back, 379. The bank manager led me down to the vault. Mr. Hale was very specific about this box, she said. Only you and he had access. He opened it about 6 months ago. 6 months ago, right when his health started declining, right when he'd started having mysterious meetings he never explained. Inside the box, no wills, no insurance papers, personal letters, printed emails, financial statements, surveillance photos, a letter in Walter's handwriting, dated 2 months before his death, marked open only after reading everything else. I set it aside first. The first document that stopped my heart was a printed email exchange between Marcus and a man named Marcus Crawford, dated 8 months earlier. Dad's getting worse. The doctors think 6 months. We need to move faster on the transfer protocols. The reply, documents prepared. Once your father signs, the business assets restructure under our shell companies. What about the wife? She won't be a problem. She doesn't understand the business side, and by the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. They'd been planning this for months. While I drove Walter to appointments and managed his medications, his own sons were plotting to steal from their dying father. Next, a statement for an account I'd never heard of, Hale Holdings, LLC. Balance, $4.7 million. A note from Walter beneath it. Colleen, this is our real savings. The boys think everything's tied up in the house and business, but I moved the bulk of our assets here months ago. I was trying to protect us. We weren't middle class. We were quietly wealthy, and his sons had been trying to rob a man who didn't need robbing. A folder labeled Private Investigation held photographs of Marcus entering an upscale casino, multiple visits over the past year. Financial records showed he owed $230,000 in gambling debts. Derek's file was worse. His consulting business was a front for failed investment schemes that had cost clients, including elderly retirees, nearly $300,000. A medical report dated 3 months before Walter's death from a neurologist I'd never met stated plainly, no signs of cognitive impairment. Mental faculties sharp, decision-making intact. His sons had been quietly suggesting his illness clouded his judgment. This report proved otherwise. The final document was a second will, dated 6 weeks before his death, leaving everything to me, with modest annual trusts for Marcus and Derek. A note in the margin read, original held by Mitchell and Associates, not Morrison Firm. 2 wills. Marcus and Derek had access to an outdated version and were using it to claim an inheritance, while the real final will sat safely with an attorney I'd never even heard of. I opened Walter's letter with shaking hands. My dearest Colleen, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and the boys have shown their true colors. I grew suspicious when they suddenly became so attentive during my illness, not out of love, but to position themselves. I hired an investigator. I moved the money. I built this whole plan to protect you. The boys think they're inheriting the house and the business. What they don't know is that I've mortgaged both properties heavily this past year. The house carries a $1.2 million lien. The business owes $800,000 to creditors. They're not inheriting assets. They're inheriting debt. Walter had built them a poison pill disguised as an inheritance. The life insurance is real, but it isn't $200,000. It's $500,000, and the extra is meant to help you start over. Martin Morrison was never supposed to handle my estate. I fired his firm 2 months ago and never told him. The boys must have convinced him to represent the family after I was gone. I know this seems cruel, Colleen, but I couldn't stand by and watch them steal from you the way they've been stealing from everyone else. They made their choices. Now they live with them. Take the money. Start fresh. Don't look back. Love always, Walter. I sat in that windowless room for nearly an hour. Walter hadn't abandoned me. He'd been protecting me the entire time. And the 2 men who'd called me mother at his funeral were common thieves. That night I had dinner with them anyway, Marcus, Derek, and Derek's wife Vanessa, because I needed to know exactly what they knew before I made my next move. Their house was a monument to borrowed money, new luxury cars in the driveway, Vanessa in a designer dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Colleen, how are you holding up?" she asked, in a voice about as genuine as her manicure. Over dinner, Marcus mentioned that my attorney had said I was ready to move forward. "Yes," I said carefully. "I've decided fighting isn't how I want to spend my remaining years." The relief on Derek's face was almost comical. "Although," I added, taking a slow bite, "I've been thinking about those medical bills. I was wondering if we should have an accountant review the estate's liquid assets before I take on that debt personally." The temperature in the room dropped. "Colleen," Marcus said carefully, "the estate assets are tied up in probate. The medical bills are separate." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "Although Walter was always so meticulous with his record keeping, I'm sure there's documentation of what belongs to the estate versus what's personal." Vanessa laughed, a little too bright. Derek's fork clattered against his plate. "I suppose I should contact the hospital directly," I continued. "Get an itemized breakdown." "That's not necessary," Derek said quickly. "I've already handled all that." "I'm sure you have. But as Walter's widow, I feel responsible for understanding exactly what happened financially during his illness. In fact, I've been finding documents in his office I don't understand. Bank statements, business papers." I paused, and a safety deposit box key I'd never seen before. Marcus went very still. "A safety deposit box? Isn't that odd? I thought I knew about all of Walter's financial arrangements." The look that passed between the brothers was pure panic, quickly buried. "I suppose I should look into it before we finalize anything." "Mother," Marcus said, his voice straining to sound casual, "why don't you let Derek and me handle reviewing whatever you found? Dad's filing system wasn't always logical." "That's very sweet," I said, "but I think Walter would want me to understand our situation myself." As I left, Marcus walked me to my car, one hand on the door. "About those documents, bring them to our next meeting. Let us help you sort through what's important." I smiled and agreed and drove away, watching him in my rearview mirror, phone already pressed to his ear before I'd even left the driveway. By the time I got home, my phone was ringing. An unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Hale, this is Arthur Mitchell from Mitchell and Associates. I believe you may have found some documents that belong to my office. We need to meet as soon as possible. There are things you need to know before you sign anything with Marcus and Derek." Arthur Mitchell's office was nothing like Gerald's polished downtown suite, a modest space with the lived-in feel of a place where real work got done. "Your husband was very thorough," he told me, pulling out a thick file. "He hired me 8 months ago to investigate some financial irregularities. As we found more, my role grew." "They were stealing from him," I said. Marcus forged his father's signature on loan documents, using the family business as collateral for gambling debts. Derek was worse, systematically moving client funds into his own shell companies. Both were facing potential criminal charges: grand larceny, wire fraud, elder abuse. He spread the real estate records across his desk. As of 6 months ago, both properties are leveraged to the maximum. Your husband took out mortgages totaling $1.2 million on the house, $800,000 on the villa, specifically so that whoever inherited them would inherit the debt with it. That money is sitting safely in an account only you can access. "So when they inherit the properties," I said slowly, "they inherit debt that's $600,000 more than the properties are worth." "That's correct, and there's more." He handed me a copy of the real will. One clause stood out. I leave the decision of what, if anything, my sons shall inherit entirely to my beloved wife, Colleen, trusting in her wisdom and judgment to determine what they truly deserve. He left it up to me, I whispered. And the life insurance isn't $200,000, it's $500,000, plus an additional $300,000 policy they don't know exists. $800,000 combined with the $4.7 million already moved to protect me. I wasn't just secure, I was wealthy. Your husband documented everything, Mitchell continued. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer. If you choose to pursue criminal charges, we have more than enough for convictions. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Marcus. Mitchell shook his head. Not yet, but something in the persistence made me answer. Colleen, we need to talk. There's been a development. Someone from Mitchell and Associates called Derek this morning, claiming documents that supersede the will. We think someone might be trying to defraud the estate. I'll be there within the hour, I said, and hung up. Mitchell leaned back. So, Mrs. Hale, what do you want to do? I thought about Vanessa's designer dress and the cars in their driveway, about Marcus's arrogance and Derek's false concern, about 22 years of being dismissed, patronized, and ultimately betrayed. And I thought about Walter in that hospital bed, spending his final weeks protecting me from the sons he raised. I believe, I said standing, it's time they learned about the consequences of their choices. The conference room at Morrison and Associates had never felt so small. Marcus and Derek sat across the table, pale but still trying to hold their composure. Gerald sat at the head, clearly out of his depth. Mitchell sat beside me with a briefcase full of evidence. Colleen, Marcus began, this whole situation has gotten confusing. We need to clear up some misunderstandings. That's because Walter didn't trust your firm anymore, I said to Gerald directly. The room went dead silent. He discovered someone was feeding his estate information to Marcus and Derek. He couldn't be sure who, so he took his business elsewhere. That's impossible, Marcus said. Dad trusted Martin completely. Then why did he secretly hire a private investigator 8 months ago to look into your finances? Why did he move $4.7 million into an account only I can access? Derek made a choking sound. That's not possible. Mitchell opened his briefcase. Your father was considerably wealthier than either of you realized. The house you think you're inheriting carries a $1.2 million mortgage. The villa, $800,000 in liens. He took out these loans specifically to ensure any inheritance came with debt attached. Marcus's face went gray. You're lying. I'm afraid not. Forged signatures on loan documents, wire transfers proving embezzlement, recorded conversations of you both discussing how to manipulate your father's estate while he was dying. Mitchell's voice never rose. Your gambling debts, Marcus. $230,000. Your fraudulent investment schemes, Derek. Nearly $300,000 in client losses. This is harassment, Derek said, his voice cracking. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I said, I can. The real will leaves everything to me. What you inherit is entirely my decision. I pulled out a document I'd prepared that morning. This is a gift deed. I'm giving you exactly what you tried to give me. Marcus grabbed it, read it, and his face cycled through confusion, understanding, and finally horror. You're giving us the house and the villa, with the mortgages. That's correct. Property's worth $1.6 million with $2 million in debt attached. That leaves you $600,000 underwater. Seems fitting, given your existing financial troubles. You can't do this, Marcus said, but there was no conviction left in his voice. Actually, I can. It's exactly what Walter intended. And if we refuse? Derek asked. Mitchell answered. Then Mrs. Hale pursues criminal charges for elder abuse, grand larceny, and wire fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. You'd both be facing significant prison time. The silence stretched on. Finally, Marcus spoke. What do you want from us? Sign the papers accepting the inheritance as offered. Agree never to contact me again except through attorneys. And understand, this is what your father chose for you, not out of hatred, because you forced his hand. They signed. They didn't have a choice. As they filed out, Marcus paused at the door. This isn't over, Colleen. Yes, I said calmly. It is. 3 months later, I sold the properties they couldn't afford to keep and moved into a cottage overlooking the Pacific, paid for in cash, with more money left over than I could spend in several lifetimes. Marcus filed for bankruptcy and entered court-mandated gambling counseling. Derek moved back in with his mother, working nights at a hotel near the airport. Vanessa filed for divorce. I spent my days rebuilding the neglected garden that came with the cottage, planting roses like the ones Walter and I once grew together. For the first time in my adult life, I answered to no one but myself. One afternoon, a young woman stopped by my gate. I'm Sarah Mitchell, Arthur's daughter. I work with women escaping financial abuse. My father thought you might understand what they're going through. I did understand. 2 months later, I founded a foundation for financial justice, offering legal support and education to victims of family financial abuse. It wasn't the legacy Marcus and Derek expected to leave behind. It was exactly the one Walter would have wanted. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you have fought them in court, or would you have let Walter's plan play out the way it did? Comment fight or trust the plan below. I'll be reading every one. If this story got to you, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.